Hey everyone, just with all the bomb threats going on, I wanted to take this opportunity to try and get this lesson in like a short format, maybe 15 minutes or so. That first and second period have already seen, but sixth period, obviously with the bomb threats and evacuations, you guys haven't seen it yet. So I wanted to try to get an abbreviated form anyway of the lesson on the tax graph and upload this to YouTube. So basically what we've been talking about the last couple days is a tax on products, okay? What happens when there's a tax on a specific product? The example that we're going to use here is a tax on a hotel room. Now we know for starters that anytime we have a tax, we know that it's the supply curve that is always affected. And we also know that it's the supply decreasing, and so the supply is going to move to the left. Now let's say in this particular instance that we're going to talk about a tax on hotels, okay? And let's say that in a particular place we've got I don't know, let's pick on Julia, okay? Let's say that Julia has her hotel set up, and let's say that right now she's charging roughly $180 a night, okay, about $180 a night, and she's selling roughly 100 rooms, okay? So that's kind of our starting point. Then we know that the supply curve is going to shift to the left if there is a tax put on hotels. And taxes are put on hotels all the time. In Gainesville, it's about a 14% tax. Orlando, it's almost 28%. So pretty significant there. So let's say that we shift the supply curve over to the left. And let's say it's a $20 tax. Okay, that's a flat rate $20 tax per room per night. Now, if we look at this here, I'm going to put two additional numbers right up here. 190 and 170. So the difference between 190 and 170, that is a $20 difference. However, what we may have expected here was that the price would go from 180 up to 200. Here's why it didn't. That 190, that's the price that consumers are paying. See, that's the new equilibrium. That's what consumers are paying. However, the price that sellers actually keep is 170, okay? They were used to keeping 180, now they keep 170. What this means is that essentially Julia has decided to eat $10 of the tax. She's passing $10 out of that $20 tax onto the consumers, and then she's eating the other $10 of the tax. Now, people might ask, why on earth would someone do that? Why would a producer end up actually paying part of the tax out of their own money? Well, it's to try to keep more people actually buying whatever product it is that you're selling. In this case with hotels, we know there's going to be a reduction. Anytime you increase the price, there's going to be a reduction. But it may not be as big a reduction as if she had put that price all the way up at $200, okay? So let's say here for a second that we have 80 people, that Julia now has 80 people paying that tax. So if you wanted to find the amount of money that the government makes from that tax, all you would do is say, okay, it's a $20 tax. It's being paid by 80 people, okay? And I'll kind of put down here, hopefully you guys can see 20 times 80. That should be 1,600. Hopefully my math is right on that, but $1,600 should be the amount of my tax revenue. Now what I'm going to do here real quick is just kind of outline this box and show graphically. This box represents the amount of the tax. No big deal, right? Okay, now let me actually just check the video for a second, see where I've got more space. I got more space over here. So I want to show you real quick again without the tax. Let's go back for just a moment and show the supply and demand curve without the tax back when it was 180. With this graph, I want to sort of divide up the two triangles that we see right here. This first triangle that follows the demand curve, this is called the consumer surplus. I'm just abbreviating here so I've got space. But consumer surplus. The consumer surplus is a theoretical sort of concept. These are all the people that want to get a hotel room that are willing to spend more than $180, but they don't have to. They only have to pay $180. So just as an example, let's say, okay, it's Julia's Hotel or whatever. Let's say that maybe Hayden and his buddies are wanting to take a spring break trip, and they were willing. They pooled their money. They were willing to spend up to $250 a night on the spring break trip, for lodging and what have you. And they go, oh my gosh, we only have to spend $180. Now they're saving $70 a night. Now that's kind of a good thing, because what do most people do when they save money? They're going to spend it at some point. And so Hayden and his buddies go, all right, cool, we're not spending that at Julia's now, so instead we're going to take that $70 and we're going to go out to a nice steakhouse, or we're going to go to, some other place. And maybe it's not a super nice place, but they're going to go spend their money in some other restaurant and put more money in the economy. So that's kind of a good thing. At the same time, this bottom triangle down here, this is, as you might guess, the one that follows along the supply line. Instead of consumer surplus, this is the producer surplus. These are the rooms that Julia would have been willing to sell for less than $180, because if she doesn't sell them, they're just going to sit there vacant. She's not making any money on them. So these are the rooms that she would have been willing to sell for less than $180, but she didn't have to. Again, she got $180 for them. Now the cool thing on that for Julia, what she's happy about, aside from the fact, hey, I got more money, she can also put more money, some of that additional money as part of her producer surplus. She can put that back into her business. She can expand. She could maybe, get a swimming pool. She could hire more workers. So this is good for the economy as well when you've got producer and consumer surplus. Economists like consumer and producer surpluses. And obviously Julia likes this as well because, again, she could have dropped the rate on certain rooms and didn't have to. She's making $180 per night on those. So this is pretty good as well. Now if we take that and now we compare it to this graph with the taxes, if you see, we still have two triangles, okay? We've still got two triangles, but those two triangles are both smaller. And so we do have a consumer surplus, but this consumer surplus is now not the people willing to spend over 180, it's people willing to spend over 190. So our consumer surplus has been reduced because of the tax. At the same time, we have a producer surplus down here. But instead of the producer surplus for Julia or whoever else might be selling rooms, instead of that being people that were able to essentially get over 180, or were willing to sell rather for less than 180 and didn't have to, now it's being willing to sell for less than 170 and didn't have to, because that's only the amount that Julia's keeping. Remember, she charges 190, but then she's got to pay a $20 tax. She's only keeping 170 of it. So both the consumer and producer surplus has been reduced by the tax. But if you notice from this graph to this one, there's also another area that we don't see on that we do here. And that's this triangle, okay? This triangle in the middle. We're going to make this guy purple. That triangle in the middle is what we call the dead weight loss, DWL, dead weight loss. Dead weight loss is sort of the loss to the economy, the loss to producer and consumer surplus that you can't recoup by the tax, okay? We would say in part, okay, well, yeah, you're losing consumer and producer surplus, but you're getting this tax. And that means the government can take that money and go spend it on things like schools or roads or other types of things. And that would say, okay, well, that might be a worthy trade-off. The problem is it's not the whole trade-off, because you've got this area here that's a loss to producer and consumer surplus, but it's not going to tax revenue. It's just sort of lost to the economy. The reason that that's the case is that you went from 100 rooms being sold to 80 rooms being sold. Julia is not making money on those 20 rooms, and also the consumers are not getting those 20 rooms. That's what the deadweight loss is made up of. Now, I know we would never think of doing geometry in a social studies class, and yet here we are. breaking barriers in Forgione's room, right? We may have to at some point calculate the area of a triangle here to calculate the amount of the deadweight loss. So if we have to do that, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. We just take area of a triangle, 1/2 base times height. So I'll put it down here, 1/2 base times height. In this case, that would be 1/2 of 20 times 20. Probably should have used different numbers there, but here we are. So 1/2 times 20 times 20. Okay, so 1/2 of 20 is 10. 10 times 20, $200. That's what we end up with for my deadweight loss there, is $200 that is just sort of lost to the economy. Now, a couple other things on this, and I know I'm going fairly quick, but it's on video, so you can always back up and watch it over if you want. This one looks kind of normal, okay? These graphs here look like a basic supplier demand graph. It could be different. You could see something different if the AP said, you know, what if this happened for an elastic demand curve? Or what if it happened for an inelastic demand curve? Now, I'm not going to go through the actual graphic portion on this, but just to think for a second, if it's an inelastic demand curve, okay, inelastic means necessity. So if we took a product like, I don't know, say toilet paper, okay, and we wanted to tax toilet paper, if we wanted to tax an inelastic product, all right, well, we know when the price goes up that people still buy it. So guess what's going to happen? On the tax, you're not going to be splitting it like we see here between the buyer and seller. If it's an inelastic product, the buyer's willing to pay a higher price anyway because it's a necessity. So the buyer is going to pay the vast majority of the tax if it's an inelastic product. If it's a $20 tax on something that's inelastic, you know, the buyer might pay $18 of it and the seller only $2. Because again, it's inelastic, it's a necessity. The buyer's willing to spend money even when the price goes up on something like that. Now, an elastic good would be the reverse. That would be something where you would see the seller having to pay most of the tax because it's a luxury. We know on elastic goods, when the price goes up, we're not into that. We don't want to pay that. So it's the seller that would have to pay the majority of the tax if it was elastic. The buyer pays the majority if it's inelastic. Okay, guys, I know that's like a crash course on what we've been doing, but hopefully that's helpful. If not, I'll try to catch you guys up. But let's take a look at, hopefully you've taken a look at this. Hopefully you have, you'll let me know any questions that you have. And I may do a little bit more of this as sort of a flipped classroom once in a while. I may have you guys do a little 15-minute video at home and then do more problems or what have you in class. So kind of give me some feedback. Let me know how this worked or how this didn't work, and I'll try to make adjustments for there. Thanks a lot, and stay safe.